understand the subculture of roughnecks, that was really eye-opening to go down to Oklahoma and hang out with these guys.
What's the Win Lucy at Matt story?
It sounds corny, but I saw her across a crowded room and there was a beam of light on her.
Greatest athlete of all time.
They say the hardest thing in sports is to hit a round ball with a round bat.
Only a Bostonian would have put baseball even in contention. Most impressive person you've ever met?
I believe he's what we're going to evolve into in 500 years.
I love that. Bennifer gonna make it or no?
Oh, man.
Hey family, welcome to the Carlos Watson Show. Got a truly great one for you today. The one and only Matt Damon, that's right, Oscar winner, Golden Globe Award winning actor, writer, producer, burst onto the Hollywood scene, of course, in 1997 with Good Will Hunting. Since then, too many good films to count. I mean, I'm talking about the Bourne films, Talented Mr. Ripley, The Martian, the Ocean's Trilogy, Departed, so many more. He's got a wonderful new film. It's called Stillwater. Everybody's raving about it. Get ready for my time with Matt Damon.
The Carlos Watson Show is brought to you by American Family Insurance.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Carlos, how are you? Sorry, you caught me yawning.
Oh, man. So how much are you worn out now? Are they just doing you back to back, day in and day out, or?
These are the longer form interviews, so they're much easier. I enjoy them, because they're more substantive.
I saw you with Dan Patrick, and I enjoyed you guys together. That was kind of a good dynamic, even though he said he hadn't had you for 5 years.
5 years ago today was the last time we had you on.
Is it really that long? As I get older, I'm 50 now, and as I get older, I'm just shocked at time. He said that to me, and I was just astonished. But I guess that's part of, getting older, is suddenly you lose 5 or 10 years, and, you blink, and it's another decade.
It's wild when you say 50, I know. I appreciate that. I hit that too. I won't admit it, but I hit that too.
You don't look it, though. You don't look it at all.
You got to say that. But do you feel any type of way having turned 50 or not yet?
Before this, 50, the concept of 50 to me was most familiar to me for some reason when my dad turned 50. We had a big birthday party for him. And I remember thinking, wow, he's really old. And which is in such contrast to how I feel.
I feel like your friend Clooney, in an interesting way, has kind of stretched that sense of how long you're vibrant. And I also think in an interesting way, Oprah may have done that too. That, she's almost 70. You never know it.
I can't even with her because it's I don't understand how that happens. I mean, she looks fantastic. George takes such good care of himself too that he's just aging beautifully, right? I mean, but these people are pretty good looking to begin with. I'm just gonna age, man.
You never know. I look at your boy Tom, and he is, 44 now?
Yeah, but his regimen is pretty significant. He's really an outlier, specifically because of how he takes care of himself.
How early did you guys become friendly?
Oh, early on. I mean, I think I met him. He and Lawyer Malloy had little walk-on parts in Stuck on You.
Lawyer Malloy?
Yeah.
Who has heard that name in a while? That's a good one to pull out.
So I remember those guys coming down. Troy Brown was down there.
Nice.
Troy had a walk-on role. So the Farrelly brothers are, Massachusetts guys. And so they're always kind of sports figures hanging around those guys. So I met Tom, actually the same time I met my wife. I've been with my wife now for 18 years, and I met her on that movie.
I call them When Harry Met Sally stories. So what's the When Lucy Met Matt story?
It was a Saturday night and I was out with just a bunch of people on the crew. And I literally, it sounds corny, but I saw her across a crowded room and there was, a beam of light on her. I remember she was smiling and laughing, and she is, subsequently told me yeah, there was a spotlight, dummy. That was the bartender. Yeah, there's a beam of light. You're an idiot. But I remember it in a much more romantic way, I think.
And where is she from originally?
She was born in Argentina. And so she moved when she was 9 months old. There was a military government down there, and people were starting to disappear, and friends of her mom's were starting to disappear. And so they fled to America.
Father of the girl, the American student?
Yes, ma'am. Allison came here for college, and that's where she met this girl, Lena. One night she found Lena dead and called the police. All they cared about was Allison sleeping with some Arab girl.
I loved her,
I know you did.
but everybody thinks that I killed her.
So Matt, how did you end up doing Stillwater?
Tom sent me the script, and I just thought it was great, unlike anything I'd ever done. And I'd really been wanting to work with him, so it was a super easy decision for me.
What did you learn prepping for it? I heard that you went down to Oklahoma. You spent a bunch of time with folks down there.
You know, I read the script, and I love the dynamics between the father and the daughter, between this character I was playing and all these other characters that come into the story. I just really believed it all. But I didn't understand the subculture of roughnecks and what that was. Roughnecks work on the oil rigs. And so that was really eye-opening to go down to Oklahoma and hang out with these guys and understand their perspective and try to understand what this character does and why he does everything he does. And it's a really particular subculture. And it's so different from, you know, where I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's like, couldn't be more different, but really fascinating and really specific. And so all of the detail and the physicality of the performance and all of that stuff came from hanging with those guys down there.
You do your homework? Homework?
No.
Appreciate the honesty. Yeah, I used to hate school too. Hated everything about it. Dropped out of high school, worked a rig like my daddy, started making whole. Is that what you gonna do? You gonna make whole?
Oui, I make whole.
And I mean, if I were to have a takeaway, Carlos, it would be like, I'm very lucky to be able to do this thing, which is to kind of parachute into somebody else's life and observe them. And they welcome me in because I'm an actor. And I just wish more people could do it, because I always leave feeling that we're so much closer and what binds us is so much greater than what divides us. You know, I always leave those trips angry at politicians for kind of stoking those divides. And I was talking with Tom about what we should be celebrating. Like, the way these guys live in rural Oklahoma is so different than the way I live here in New York City. Why is that a bad thing? Like, that should be an amazing thing, a beautiful thing, that our country has that level of diversity of the way we all live and organize our lives and the communities that we bring together. Like, that's awesome. Like, you know, that shouldn't be something we're arguing about or we're divided over.
Hey, say more about that, because I don't know that I ever had a chance to spend time in a place like Stillwater and get immersed in something like that roughneck area.
Kenny Baker was the name of the guy that was really our first point of contact there. And he and this other guy, Ryan Stewart, really took us all around to their rigs and, you know, and we're explaining how to do the job. Then we went to Kenny's house, and he's on 60 acres in rural Oklahoma, Marlow, Oklahoma. And he just had a barbecue. A bunch of the other roughnecks came over and their families, and we just sat around in the backyard and drank beer and ate barbecue and laughed about our political differences, laughed about, you know what I mean? Just had the best day. Yeah. Then the boys were like, "Hey, Dad, can I get the shotguns?" And they're like, "Yeah." They come out like with the shotguns, like broken down over their arm, exactly how you're supposed to like teach firearm safety. And then we went around and started skeet shooting competitions, because they all wanted to challenge Jason Bourne to a skeet shooting contest.
Right, of course.
I'm not gonna say who won, but those kids could shoot.
Right.
I was like, wow, man, this is such a different life. You couldn't do any of this in New York City, right? If you pull out a shotgun in New York City, you're under arrest. But like out in rural Oklahoma, like this makes total sense. And they were a beautiful family, and they were a beautiful community of friends, and it was just all positive. And you go like, all right, well, this is my way into this character, right? The values they have, the love they have for each other and for their families. And this is exactly what I feel. I just organize my life in an entirely different way because of my experience and where I'm from. So I always leave those things feeling like, yeah, the things that really matter to all of us. The political differences we had, we literally would laugh them off, right? We poke fun at each other, you know, like I'm the Hollywood liberal, right?
So get into that. What did they, like, how deep did you guys go into the political difference stuff?
What was interesting to me was to try to understand, I'm playing one of these guys, so I have to understand their thought process. And so to me, it boils down to, all right, yeah, they're in one of the reddest states. I mean, as red as you get. And they're working in the oil business, in the oil fields in particular, right? In Oklahoma. So they're going to vote red down the ticket no matter what. There's no news there, right? It's not even, it's just, and for them, it's like a binary proposition. The way they look at it, this is what I do for my family. This is my job that protects my family, that provides for my family. Like, I'm going to vote that way. That's it. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated like that. I mean, you get, every level of, Republican, right? In that, I'm sure. But for the guys that I talked to, it wasn't any more complicated than that. Like, this is, and they talked openly about like feeling like we're powering the country. They don't like people looking down their nose at them. And then you go like, I was with Kenny the other night here in New York City because he came up for the premiere with his family, and I had him over and we were looking out over the city, and he said, these lights are on. You know what I mean? You want to look down your nose at a roughneck, man. You're using the power, right? That's his view, and he sees the hypocrisy in that. So anyway, I left there really like having made some great friends.
I had another guy, Joel Kinnaman.
Sure, he's a great actor.
He told me, he said, Carlos, part of what I like about acting is it allows me actually to unleash some emotions or explore some emotions I probably wouldn't on my own.
That's true. And I mean, this character behaves in ways that I wouldn't, there's a scene in this movie that I love where this French lawyer's kind of giving me the runaround, and he starts to write out this list of private detectives, and I'm telling him I don't want the list. And then I take it and I literally throw it, and it's this little flash of violence. And I swear at him, I don't need your bleeping list. And the whole scene changes. Like suddenly this guy who was kind of pompous and aloof, and like suddenly he's like, oh, I might get my ass whooped right now by this roughneck, right? And it's like, and I love that, but that's not something I would do in my normal life. But there is a thrill when you invest that and it's real. And the director leaves the camera right on and you are not lying, right? That's the rush, is when you see it and you're like, yeah, I believe that. Clint Eastwood had a great line about it. There's a scene in Mystic River when Sean Penn finds out they found his daughter's body, and he starts to scream, is that my daughter in there? And the police are holding on to him, and he's just screaming, is that my daughter in there? And I asked Clint about it. I said, Clint, you always do just one take. Like, how many takes do you do of that? He goes, one. I'm like, so wow, how'd you do that? He goes, well, I used real cops, so they know how to restrain somebody. And I went over to the cops. I said, I didn't say anything to Sean. This is Sean Penn, right? Right. He just said, I just went over to the cops and said, you better get a hold of this guy because he ain't going to be faking it. And that was the only direction he gave. That's when an actor brings it.
Give me your dream team. Give me your Fab Five of actors.
I mean, Brando's really at the top of that list. He really revolutionized everything. De Niro was a huge influence. Somebody asked me to name some of my favorite movies the other day, and I just started naming movies, and I realized De Niro was in all of them. Gene Hackman was somebody for me that was a huge touchstone. He was not a showy actor. I loved what he did because it was just completely invested and real. I'd say Meryl Streep, on balance, she's one of the best actors to ever live. I'm going to leave the last spot open. That way nobody will get mad at me. I was going to say you.
All right, you know what? I'm going to take it.
Be fearless! We can do it! I believe in you! We can do it faster!
Our home is the training ground for her dreams policy. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Now, talk to me about your favorite movies, because I think I narrowed it down to my top three of yours. What's in your top three of your own work?
Good Will Hunting certainly changed our lives completely. And so I can't really separate that movie from what it did to our lives. I don't know. What do you think? You tell me.
The Departed?
Oh, The Departed. Yeah.
The first three Bourne ones, I think those may be the best action films I've seen.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, what's your sliding doors? If this thing hadn't worked out, I know you were at Harvard, I know you left early. What do you think would have happened?
I always felt like I wanted to do this, and so I would have kept slugging it out. I loved writing. So, I felt like I can write, I can act. There's certainly a more modest life I could carve out for myself, taking smaller roles. And, it's very feast or famine, this business. But I did feel like the business was signaling back to me that I'd go to an audition and I'd get called back, or I'd get called back a few times. I might not get the part, but the casting director would say, that was a really good audition. And those little ways that the business kind of signals to you, you're in the right line of work.
Hey, tell me about Good Will Hunting, because we always are talking on this show about how people dream fearlessly, how they break through. And I want to understand it not only for myself, but for people who are watching. When you look back, why did it work and what can other people take away from it?
Well, Ben and I always said, because there were a lot of different ways that movie could have been set up. There were a lot of different ways we could have gone with the story. And what we always said, and we benefited from really, really great executives who developed that movie and developed it towards what it became. So we really benefited from just wonderful, smart people, you know, who had power and who got the best out of us. And but what we always said was, you know, this will show how dated it was. We'd say, even if it's a video cassette on our mantle, right? We need to love it. You and me need to love it. And I think the purity of that, of just making the movie for ourselves, just the one that we're making the thing that we loved, and not trying to imagine what it is. Like, I always see people twist themselves into knots in this business, going like, here's what I think people want to see, right? It's like, well, don't do that. Just do what you want to see. Because at the very least, I mean, it's always hit or miss with movies. Sometimes they catch on and sometimes they don't. At least you'll love it, right? At least you'll stand by it. And I'd seen too many actors kind of go, well, I'm doing this movie because I don't like it, but I think it's what people want to see. And then they spend 6 months of their life on it, and then the movie comes out and nobody goes and sees it because everybody who made the movie is not really invested in it. And, you know, and then you've just lost 6 months of your life. So I'd say to work on the things that you really have a passion for and love, and just try to make the thing that you love. If you love it, there's a chance other people will love it too.
The last year, more conversation about race than we as a country, maybe we as a world, have had in 50 years.
Yeah.
Anything interesting in there for you, or surprising or different, or did you find yourself in a new place as it relates to that, either looking back or looking forward on questions of race?
I guess I think about it through the lens of my kids and trying to help them understand. How do I bring them along to understand this country in the context of race, right? Like, how can I help them? I mean, I grew up in Cambridge, which was like, didn't feel like the real world. It was like, as we said, the People's Republic of Cambridge. It was a melting pot. I remember graduation, they said, we have 170 countries represented in our high school. And a couple months later, I got to Harvard, and at the convocation speech, they were like, we have 83 countries represented. And I was like, wow, but I'm from a very specific place. And so I just have to like do my best to try to listen, knowing that I have, like, you talk about blind spots. I'm an American male white movie star. That is rarefied air, you know what I mean? And I got to work to try to understand what life is like for most people.
Any interesting conversation with the guys down in Oklahoma? Anything interesting there, matters of race?
It didn't come up. It didn't come up, though they alluded to the fact that some of the guys they worked with were racist. And we put that in the movie. We're trying to get information from this guy who's overtly racist, Camille's character. She's saying, I'm not going to talk to him. And my character says, well, you must live in some fancy ass world, honey, because I work with guys like that all the time. And what he's saying is he's voicing this kind of blue collar argument of like, I can't choose who I work with. I got to take a job when I got to take a job. And they're both right and they're both wrong. You know what I mean?
Most beautiful place you've ever been in the world?
Probably Kauai, I would say, the North Shore of Kauai.
Ooh. Matt, what's your go-to for trips these days? Are you an Airbnb guy like me?
Airbnb. Normally, you know, I got to crash in a city for a few months, and normally, an apartment's going to be better than a hotel for longer term living. When we're shooting, it's usually an Airbnb.
Hey, you mind if I finish up by doing a little rapid fire with you?
Sure, man.
Your favorite book of all time?
It's going to sound like a cop-out, but I got to probably go Catcher in the Rye. Actually, you know what? I'm going to amend that. I'm going to tell you my favorite book of all time. Probably, I've read it a number of times. I've read The Princess Bride to all of my kids. You know, so I've read it, I think, 3 times now. The final 2 got it at the same time, before bed. And the fun that I had overacting and doing all the voices, there were literally nights where they were asleep and I kept going because I was having so much fun.
Most valuable or interesting thing you've learned about parenting, especially as the dad of daughters?
Humility, every day. Yeah. I don't know if other parents out watching this can relate. There are those nights where you just put your head on the pillow and you go, man, I screwed that up. Like, I could have done better. And it's like, you know, it's a relentless job and you can't get it right all the time.
Bennifer gonna make it or no?
Oh man, I'm no one's pulling harder than I am. They're both great. I just want for their happiness, and they seem pretty happy right now.
All right, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Greatest athlete of all time, Matt Damon edition.
They say the hardest thing in sports is to hit a round ball with a round bat. So does that make you have to go, Barry Bonds at the height of his hitting prowess, right? But I think a sport where you need to move more, I would probably go with a basketball player. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an impossible question, but I don't think you can go wrong with MJ.
Only a Bostonian would have put baseball even in contention. Most impressive person you've ever met?
Nelson Mandela. I met Nelson Mandela twice. And I can't think of a human being that is more impressive than Nelson Mandela. We made that movie about him, and it was based on a book. And the guy who wrote the book's name was John Carlin. And he was in South Africa at the time of, the ending of apartheid and Mandela coming out of prison. And John knew Mandela personally. And I was having dinner with him about 10 years ago. And I said, how could you spend 27 years in prison and come out and forgive the people who put you there? Like, how does that happen? You forgive your jailer? And that's the central conundrum of this man. And I was like, was he an angel? And John said, which I thought was really great, he said, no, I believe Nelson Mandela is what we're going to evolve into in 500 years. Isn't that great?
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Matt, thank you so much for taking the time.
I appreciate you having me. I love the interview. Thank you.
Matt Damon, Crew Talk, take one, marker. Good Will Hunting was probably the biggest reason why I went to film school.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then he's doing a movie about my home state. It's just, it could not get better. But he was just as pleasant and cool as I thought he would be.
I'm such a big all the Bourne movies fan. I can watch those movies a million times over and over again.
Me too.
And even late night when it just pops up on cable, I'll just watch it to watch. He's just so amazing on the screen. I would like to say that I think Matt Damon is probably the most crush-worthy guest.
Oh, nice.
I want to co-parent with him. I really do. I loved what he said about parenting and looked at his position as a white, very privileged man and how he can help his kids see beyond. I really, really liked him. I think he is probably a very genuinely interesting, kind, aware person. He talked a lot about acting, which surprised me, how serious he is about the craft. There's something about him that seems like things come very easy to him. And I liked hearing him talk about the process for him and how it's really fascinating and how he clearly is studying other actors.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed Matt Damon as much as I did. Always been one of my favorite actors. Also, what a down-to-earth guy. I love all the interesting and different experiences he had. I love how much he loves the craft. And I love, of course, how much he loves sports. I could talk about that all day long. All right, like that, we're out of show. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Join us next time right here on The Carlos Watson Show. Be safe, be well.